Hi everyone, we're going to have a look at the XML Conform using QuickTime Media. Now the XML, for those of you who do not know what it is basically an interchange format that comes from Final Cut Pro. It's not like a regular EDL which just gives you cuts and dissolves. It in fact brings across a whole lot more information. So for example, here I have a screen grab from Final Cut Pro. This timeline you can see has got multiple layers, it's got multiple effects, including text effects, and I want to try and rebuild this conform as best as possible inside of Smoke. Now for those of you who are Flame operators, this whole conforming process which I'm about to show you is exactly the same in your application as well. Now inside of Final Cut Pro, the other thing to point out is I'm using QuickTime Media. One of the things that people are pushing for these days is the ability to reuse and repurpose the media as you're going along the production pipeline, and this is what we hope to show you. So for example, where it all begins is actually inside the clip library. So if we go into our clip library, down at the bottom you'll find your import options. So you select Import XML and then we go into the import menu. Now navigate through your file browser until you find your XML file. Once you've located it, just select it. At the very bottom here, you'll see the file attributes tell me that the product is Final Cut Pro. It tells me the composition. Now the composition is actually the sequence that was exported out of Final Cut Pro. It also tells me the frame rate as well as the duration. Now at this point, you can choose to either recapture the media from tape or simply relink with the existing media that was used in Final Cut Pro. So ensure that link with video and link with audio is turned on. Once the XML is loaded, you'll see in the recapture window that the tape list is empty, but the file-based list is populated. Just swipe over to the right and this will then give you a full view of all these lists. Now, if I was to just expand the columns out, we can see that this is all QuickTime-based movie files. If I look down here at the bottom, I've got a few AIFF files as well, which will be my audio. So we want to bring all this media in. So to first bring the media into Smoke, we need to identify where the media is located. The file path structure that we have over here is based on what Final Cut Pro was seeing, but perhaps our file directory structure may be slightly different to that of Final Cut Pro. So in this case, we need to realign it. So you need to locate where the files are. So firstly, we want to search for QuickTime files. Now, in order to do this, we need to set a root path. What I mean by this is you need to locate where your media is. For this example, what I have is I've got QuickTime files arranged in a few different folders. Each folder is actually representative of a reel or tape name. So by setting my directory above all these folders means that when Smoke searches for the files, it will then locate all the files regardless of how far down in the directory structure they may be located. So once I've set my root level, we need to now define the search criteria. So I'm going to base the search on file names, and then I tell the system to go ahead and search all the entries to find all the media. Once the media is located, it then gets highlighted. Now as I mentioned, here I have got two AIFF files, which is my audio soundtrack. So under search file type, just change the option to audio. The only search criteria we have is file name, and then just do a research on selected. So if you have all different types of media being used in your timeline, you have to identify each one of those types separately and then relink to them. Once we've located the media, so we haven't actually brought it into the application, once we've located it, we now need to then bring it in and work with it. So the first file type we're going to have a look at is the QuickTime file type. Now under the metadata, we need to tell Smoke exactly how to react and consider these files. So first off, the tape name for the file will actually come from the XML. The timecode will also come from the XML. The remaining options are not actually applicable to the QuickTime media, so these are the only options we need. If we have a look at the audio options, the only thing that's important here is actually the frame rate. Now, if I just go back to the QuickTime option over here, and we select the files, we're almost ready to go to start importing it. Now, for importing, you have got two options. You can either do what we refer to as a hard import. A hard import will means that it'll take the QuickTime files and then convert them into our own type of media. So in this case, with a standard file system, these QuickTime movies would be converted into DPX files. This will take time, number one, and number two, it will also take up space on your drive. So hard importing is sometimes not the best way to go. The second option you have is to do a soft import. So just by taking the hard text and dragging it over, you can switch it to soft importing. This means that it's just simply going to link to the file wherever it may be. Just to show you, if I was now to go ahead and hit import all files, the files are instantly imported into the system, so it's instantly linking to those files. Now if the files are on your local storage, you might get the performance you need to play the files back in real time. However, if you're linking to the files across a network with a slow network connection, your frames will stutter. However, you still have full access to that media when you perform the soft import, and this is very, very important. The last part of this process is then to go ahead and do a relink. So we've actually brought the media in, and the way I can verify this for you is if I was just to bring back my list and just click on any of the entries, you'll notice in my viewer over here, I can see the various bits of media. I can scrub through it as well as play it. However, it's just brought in the individual clips. It hasn't associated it with any timelines. Now, what's the point that it doesn't put the media in the timeline immediately? Well, one of the scenarios I can think of is if you are versioning. So if you have a 1 minute, 30 second, maybe 10-second version, you want to reuse the same media again and again, you don't want to have to import or even soft import it multiple times. This is the reason why we actually break it down into separate steps. Now down here at the bottom, you then have got your timeline reformat and consolidation options. So consolidation, very simple and straightforward. If you have got media that is possibly 2-3 seconds, but in the offline you had maybe 10 seconds worth of media, it's worth consolidating the timeline so you don't have too many handles at the head and the tail of every edit. The other thing is the reformatting tools. The reformatting tools are actually quite crucial. The reason being is in a lot of post-production processes, a lot of people will offline at a different resolution and then online at perhaps a higher resolution. So maybe in some cases, a lot of the times I've seen people offline at standard def and then online at high def, for space and speed reasons. So you may need to reformat the XML data to match the resolution that we want to work at. Once you've completed all these settings and you're happy with them, the next step is just to click Relink. What the system will do is it will then attach all those individual clips into the XML timeline, and hopefully you get the no missing media message. Once we've done the relink, I just have to come out of the recapture tool and I get two reels. The first reel at the top is the empty XML data. So this was the first import that we did. The second reel is the recapture reel. This gives us all the original media, and at the top left you will find the timeline. If I then load this timeline up into the record area, it appears, and if I look at the timeline here, we can see it is a similar looking timeline to the one that we had inside of Final Cut Pro. Now, as I mentioned before, all the layers have come across, including effects. So for example, if I was to come over to a particular point in time and we have a look, we've got an effect being applied to this clip. So what we have is if I just spool up and down the layer, it's a wipe effect. So half the screen was cut off for a particular reason. The other thing to point out here is there's also text effects that have come across as well. So as I said before, there's a lot of data that comes across from the XML that you wouldn't typically find coming across from an EDL. Now, for the things that are not supported in terms of the actual effect translation, what Smoke will do is if you come to a clip that has got an effect on it, but it's not really translated properly, if you expand out the video layer, you will see that Final Cut Pro actually has a comment. So this comment has been translated through Smoke, and it basically tells me that that type of filter is not supported by Smoke and has been replaced by an equivalent tool inside of Smoke. So it's taken you halfway there, and in this particular case I just have to then fine tune and tweak it. So if I was to make the change that was relevant to what was the equivalent as part of Final Cut Pro, I then get the result happening straight away. So it takes you to that level where you can actually competently pick up and carry on from where you left off. Hopefully this has kind of given you a little bit of a demonstration as to how you can do an XML Conform using Smoke as well as using Flame. It's very powerful and it can certainly increase your workflow.